I believe he's going to win a Nobel Prize. I'm always impressed by what he's doing. I met him in Korea a little over 12 years ago. He was one of my speakers at the Seoul Digital Forum, which is an event I ran for a few years. Cameron won the first TED Prize. He has run foundations like the Angelina Jolie Brad Pitt Foundation, the Innovation Group over at Airbnb. He's always doing something that's, I don't want to say groundbreaking, but he's definitely somebody that's innovating in a different way. And he's joining us now. Cameron Sinclair, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. You can hear me?
I could hear you. I could see you. Where are you quarantined? What part of the world?
I'm in the heart of New York City, just a couple of blocks away from the Javits Center, which, for those who don't know, is going to be New York's largest field hospital in a few days. So yeah, I'm in the midst of it.
So you're working on a project that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. It's good to have Daniel Kraft with us because he's going to hear this also. When someone is sitting in a hospital room with all that equipment, that hospital room costs about what to make?
1.5 million. If you're looking, are you looking at a full ICU unit, fully stocked? And,
Yep.
and as you know, for those who don't know, I spent 20 years in post-disaster, post-conflict reconstruction. I'm a trained architect. And so when you're building the architecture of a medical infrastructure, I'm talking about everything. So not just the devices and the bed, but actually the physical room and making sure there's supplemental space for doctors and nurses and so forth.
So you were compelled to change that paradigm.
Well, when COVID began, I started looking at it when it was spreading in Europe and Asia. And I began thinking about not the lack of masks and ventilators, but when you look at these graphs, these huge graphs, everyone says flatten the curve. That doesn't mean it's disappearing. It means we're extending the peak and lowering the peak. And when we hit the peak, it means that isolation rooms and ICU units are going to be overwhelmed, and hospitals are not going to be able to deal with the overcrowding in these vital spaces. And most of the media are focused in the hotspots in large urban areas because a lot of media are there. So whether it be LA, Seattle, New York, but once COVID goes to secondary and tertiary cities, so Bend, Oregon, Bozeman, Montana, Birmingham, Alabama. These are places with very few ICU rooms and that are ready to deal with a pandemic. So, you know, a team of us, a ragtag team of us, work with ICU doctors and medical professionals to focus on the next crisis that's going to happen through COVID, which is we are going to be so overwhelmed that our medical healthcare system is going to collapse because we don't have the capacity to deal with the kind of intense care that we need to give these patients.
Okay, and so you're working on a project. I'd love for you to show us what you're working on. Do you have the presentation or do you want me to do it?
I can do either one. I can do mine if you want to share a screen and I'll...
Why don't you share the screen? Why don't you grab it and just kind of walk us through what you're working on because it's pretty amazing.
Okay, let's go here. You guys can see my screen?
Yep.
Okay.
Now you just launched this on Monday.
No, I have Thursday.
Thursday. You launched on Thursday. Okay, got it.
So a group of us, so it's not just myself and these medical professionals, but we have everyone like modular housing experts. And for anyone who's actually with these companies, please close your ears. We may have had some people from Tesla, SpaceX, Apple, and a few other companies that have been working on high-tech solutions, moonlight with us, to come up with a solution to the next big crisis. And so I've worked in many, many disasters. And as you know, whether it be hurricanes or tornadoes, you know, or even conflict, you get a massive surge of people and then there isn't the kind of the housing for them or the educational system or the medical system that's available for this big surge. And, you know, here we have, you know, in the times of COVID and the coronavirus, that we're now beginning to get the surge of people that are becoming infected. They're trying to get tested and our hospitals are coming overwhelmed. here in New York City, most of the hospitals are at their breaking point, especially in Brooklyn and Queens. I really don't want to show you images from that because they're pretty tough. But in working with the medical professionals, we realized there was two immediate challenges. One is, how can we get more isolation spaces for people that are in semi-critical state? And how do we increase the number of ICUs, not just in urban areas, but in secondary and tertiary cities? What we didn't realize, and through this co-creation process, we have this amazing doctor called Dr. Esther Chu, and she was on, she's been on Rachel Maddow, she's been on MSNBC, she's been on CNN, talking about the needs of doctors, whether it be equipment, and really talking about some of these spaces they're setting up, which she's referring to as virus traps. So the picture you see before me is the inside of the Madrid Convention Center, which is where 5,000 people are supposed to stay. Well, if somebody has coronavirus and they're in that, they can end up spreading to a lot of people. The same as the Javits Center, the same as the Staples Center. Like, these places are going to be virus traps. This is why those cruise ships had so many people that got infected. Secondly, most doctors that you will talk to that are in ICU and ER departments that are being infected by this disaster are not going home because they don't want to infect their family members. And so they're sleeping on cots or not sleeping. And we spoke to doctors from Hackensack, New Jersey yesterday. They only have one mask. So they're not having lunch because you have to take your mask off in order to eat. So they're just not having lunch so they can keep that one mask on the whole day. So there's a massive need for call beds, some rapidly deployable beds for the actual workers. We talked about that curve. And as we began to look at what the capacity for isolation and ICU beds were, we're looking at June 20th, right? As we've closed down schools and universities, we're kind of in semi-lockdown. On June 20th, the United States will have a massive collapse of its healthcare system because we just do not have the beds in place. But we've been working on this highly deployable, rapidly deployable system that can do rest beds for doctors and nurses, care spaces for semi-critical people that includes bathrooms and using battery tech, and then a standalone microgrid capable mobile ICU unit that is currently 1/30th the cost of a new ICU room. We can build these quite rapidly in 4 to 6 weeks, and then we can deploy them in days. How did this come about? Well, we just borrowed tech from the EV world, from the auto industry. And if you look at the electric vehicle skateboard chassis, we could basically embed everything in the chassis and fold it up. So it can be PPE ready, it can have all the equipment in, and we can set up the units, these Jupe units, such that they can provide a basic care for people that just need somewhere to sleep, like a really healthy place for people to sleep. The recovery units for remote and rural communities, as well as, and we didn't realize this, for actual cities, they're in desperate need. The calls that I was taking this morning were actually from the US Virgin Islands and the Bahamas that said, US Virgin Islands, which I don't know if you guys saw, David Geffen had to take down his Instagram because he was posting pictures of him on his super yacht going around the Caribbean, kind of saying, look at me self-isolating. If David docks that boat on any of those islands, they have less than 40 ventilators for the entire island and very few ICU rooms. So, he may be having fun going around the Caribbean, but if he gets infected, he's in a lot of trouble. So, the reality is we have this disconnect from what happens once we enter that ER. We can put 24 of these units on a flatbed that can go on a pickup truck. And so we can deliver these very rapidly. They can be installed in a couple of minutes by a single person. In the last few days, we've actually set up manufacturing facilities in Texas. So, and the reason we picked Texas is we're looking at the spread of COVID, and by the time it hits the Midwest, it'll give us enough time to build enough capacity to be able to drive those across the Midwest. So it's whether it's Oklahoma, Kansas, North Dakota, Montana, like all those areas can be equipped with these mobile ICUs. And this isn't a one-time, this isn't a coffee cup solution. These units can be used again and again and again. So, one thing that the government is not talking about is what happens to Miami when it gets hit by a category 4 or 5 hurricane and COVID is still happening. No one's talking about that. We're about a month and a half away from hurricane season, and FEMA is not even thinking about what happens to hurricane season in a time of COVID. This is the team that's involved. We are having more and more people getting engaged. Like I say, Jeff Wilson, who's the founder of Jupe, this is not a nonprofit. And the reason for that is, I've run nonprofits for 20 years. If we were a nonprofit organization looking for donations, it would take us 4 to 6 weeks to get those donations. And many of those corporations don't actually pay up their CSR donation for 6 months. If we're a nonprofit and we're trying to get government funding, quite often, in the time of Katrina, FEMA waited 18 months to pay me back for building houses in Biloxi and New Orleans, and we would just collapse. So it's a for-purpose venture. We're literally closing a friends and family round on Monday so that we can get dozens into the field, and then we will scale up. We're talking to somebody who has very large factories that he recently closed down in Buffalo to reopen them so that we can actually build in New York, California, and Texas very quickly.
Hey, Cameron, I want people to know this. You broadcast twice. You do one on Facebook every day and one on Instagram Live. If people want to find you and follow you, what's your handle?
I think I'm just CA Sinclair on that's on Twitter. On Instagram, I'm _Cameron Sinclair _. I used to be It's the Limey, but apparently my British accent has gone. And then you can find me on Facebook. I'm pretty easy to find.
But I want people to be able to watch you because you go deeper into these situations and you're much more interactive with people at that time.
Oh, yeah. You could definitely ask questions, and we bring in the doctors and we talk about their needs. What's been really interesting is we've been fielding some very funny conversations. We talked to a couple of VCs that were interested in helping out. And one of the things they said, and that's why I'm showing this image, is, can you get me a standalone isolation unit for me personally, for my family, that I can put in my backyard so that if someone in the family gets sick, we can put them in there? Right? This is what I thought was kind of amazing, that like,
bunker.
Yeah, a bunker, but like a beautiful bunker, right? That has, it's ventilator ready, and basically it's your isolation room. So that's it. It's called Jupe. I'm basically the chief humanitarian advisor for the project. I'm running my own off-grid housing startup called World Changing. But this group of us decided to put 2 weeks of our lives on hold and just to focus in on this. And I think what's important is, we're building the prototypes right now.
Love it.
And if nobody comes out to support it, we're just going to help some of the rural field hospitals in Texas and then begin to work, one by one with hospitals because,
Cameron, people are asking, how do they find out more if they could contribute or invest?
Oh, you just go to jupe.com, JUPE. For those wondering about the name, we were joking about the fact that, in order to like save humanity, everybody wanted to go to Mars, but actually we kind of need to solve problems on Earth, so
Yeah.
we might as well go to Jupiter. So it's kind of like a joke on Jupiter. But Jeff Wilson is just j@jupe.com.
Just get a hold of you. Just get a hold of Cameron, everyone. Sinclair@me.com. That's how you can find him. There's his phone number on screen. If you want to screen grab this, I have this presentation. We'll make sure it's uploaded on the portal. Hey, Cameron, thanks a lot for hanging out with us.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks.
All right. So, Cameron, give me my screen back. Cameron Sinclair. I love Cameron. I watch him all the time on IG. And I still believe he's going to get a Nobel Prize. Just trust me, bet on that. He will.